You're tuned into the Counterflow Podcast, home of dissident voices,
unapproved opinions.
But you gotta get ready.
You ready?
Now here's your host
and humble narrator,
Buck Johnson. Let's go.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas. First timers on today. We got two guys from the Orthodox Health Podcast. We've got Dr. Michael and his co-host, John. I've mentioned this podcast a couple of times in a few episodes. It's so very good. Here's a couple of topics they talk about. Here's some of the titles of episodes. This is the Orthodox Health Podcast, the microcosm within Orthodoxy and the microbiome, from the Jordan to the body, water as first medicine, stillness without Christ, the false promise of yoga. Self-help is not salvation, an Orthodox response to wellness culture. Every topic I just mentioned in those titles, we're touching upon today. We're going to get the broad overview of what they do on the Orthodox Health Podcast. And then I had a bunch of questions on specific topics for friends, for myself, for you guys. And so we're going to get into those specific topics as well. For the first time, the guys from the Orthodox Health Podcast, Dr. Michael Christian and his co-host, simply known as John. What a biblical name that is. Welcome, both of you guys. Good to have you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the disincarnate voice of John.
It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I've been semi-incarnate in a couple little clips as what we termed as Ghibli John.
Well, at least what is that called? I sound like a boomer, but the little picture of you, at least it's cool looking. We'll pretend that that's exactly what you look like. I'll let you guys give it. Let's first give an intro, broadly speaking, what you do with the show, kind of where you came up with this, and then also each individual introduction on who you are, what you do. I suppose that'll come in with the broad generalization and explanation of the show anyway. So I'll give the floor to y'all.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in first. So the show started as a jump off point on Cheese Fair on Forgiveness Sunday. My wife was like, hey, you and John have been talking about orthodoxy and health related stuff for probably 8 years at this point, and you guys totally should do a podcast. And reached out to him, and within 2 days I had blessings from both of our priests and ended up recording our first episode 2 days later and dropping it on the first day of Lent. And so where that idea came from was just, I did my doctoral thesis on the ascetic practices of Eastern Orthodoxy. I did a comparative analysis. I looked at our fasting and at our prayer practices and compared them to intermittent fasting and different other religious fastings, such as Ramadan fasting, Daniel fast. And I looked at hesychastic prayer versus yoga and meditation. And the idea was, well, we can look at this from a physiological level. How does it work on the body? And then also tackle it on the health, on the spiritual end, because it's something that's deeply lost here in the West, is that we have these practices. We have people going out, searching out Eastern esotericism, searching out the New Age. And it's a situation where, why are we going outside of the Christian wheelhouse when we have it already in-house? So that, over time, I was still an inquirer at that point, and I was reading the Philokalia, which was way above my pay grade looking back on it.
Yeah, right.
Fortunately, it didn't melt my brain. And so, glory to God for that. But after I'd been received and been in the church for quite a while, and my wife throw in that little seed out there to run with it, and John was on board. So that's how the show Genesis.
Was it a nice, wifely supporting way to go, quit talking to me about this stuff and y'all just talk to a bigger audience?
There's definitely a level to which that's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, John.
My experience with the Orthodox Church, actually, I have to thank Dr. Mike for. A lot of my experience in religion, I grew up as a Roman Catholic, so I fell away for a little while. And when I started to come back and start asking questions, that 8-year period that Dr. Mike was talking about, a lot of that back and forth between him and I was, oh, by the way, you should look into this Orthodox saint, or you should read this Orthodox text. And, along the way, thank God my wife and I, we ended up coming to the one true church. And I'm really grateful to me now part of this project with the Orthodox Health Podcast, just sort of sharing some of our expertise in our professional lives with a little bit now of the Orthodox, phronema that we've been able to develop. Thank God. Mike and I both come from a background in martial arts. That's sort of where we became friends. And that realm, actually, we joke about it quite often, that so much of the combat sports world is so well suited to the Christian worldview and lifestyle. So we took to it readily. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here and talk about these important subjects with you guys.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you both. It's such a cool idea. I think I heard of the podcast. Maybe I got a DM about it or something on Instagram. I cannot remember. But yeah, it's a rare podcast that I like. I look forward to each it's like Tucker Carlson and a couple big ones, and then like y'all's is definitely on that list too.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, the topics. There's like it's like Orthodoxy. It's like you could just keep going and going and going. At first, the first few episodes, I was like, where do they go after this? And it's because my brain's so small when it comes to some of these things. And I was telling y'all off air, multiple friends of mine have and are involved in some of these same passions, if you will, to use in the secular way. And that they're talking to me about it. Then lo and behold, you guys talk about it. And it's like, wow, it's everything's related. It's like Orthodoxy. It's a worldview. So I appreciate what you guys do here. Dr. Mike, I suppose you've been Orthodox longer than, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
How long?
I was received in 2019. I started my thesis in 2017. So I've been inquiring into Orthodoxy for a little bit, and probably about a year as a catechumen, and then was received. And so I made sure that I got received before I moved down to Arkansas, because that was my one request to my wife was, no, we're getting an Orthodox wedding. Like, you can do whatever the heck you want otherwise, but that's it. So made sure that I was received in. So that was in 2019. Yeah, October.
Are y'all from Chicago? I think I've heard you say that.
New York.
New York. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was some sort of Yankee town. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And wow, New York to Arkansas. And where are you at, John?
New York as well.
Okay. That's where you are now?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm trying
Sorry
to
about
convince
the
him to come out,
Yankee insult. And you made it then, Dr. Mike, before the COVID surge, if you will, into the parishes, which is, I was part of that. I've heard one of you or both of you say that you had what we like to jokingly say is a Lulbert phase. For those listening, it's like, what? The libertarian phase, which my listeners know I was in for a long time. Which one of you was that, or was it both of you?
Definitely both.
Probably
I would
both.
say. Yeah.
Okay.
Before we were having conversations about Orthodoxy, we were having long political debates. And I mean, that was part of the pipeline to get down to that. And I was 04. I became a Randian objectivist. My high school mentor worked for JP Morgan and ended up retiring to become a high school economics teacher, and gave me a couple of copies of Ayn Rand stuff. And
wow, I will say I'm not into Ayn Rand as like I once was, of course, but for a high school economics teacher to have those sort of views is very, very rare these days. That's almost refreshing.
So that was kind of the idea. It's almost like he was being an evangelist. That was his idea, was that, hey, there's this socialism creeping in. There's all this craziness coming in politically.
Creeping in's a light way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like looking back on it, that's what he was actually trying to do. And while I don't necessarily agree with all those tenets at this point anymore, I mean, I always nominally consider myself a Christian, but was born not as a non-denominational, born again. My parents were born again. And so I somehow thought I could marry those two ideas of, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm also an objectivist. And looking back, there's literally no possible way. So
right.
Having said that, I definitely am appreciative of that formation. It gave me a lot of skepticism towards a lot of things. My father was a naturopathic doctor, so I was always skeptical from the time I was about 7 of the healthcare system. I mean, I read a book called Calling of an Angel by Dr. Gary Glum, probably about 10. And then Full Disclosure, which was also by Dr. Glum, because so the story goes, he treated a MI6 agent for cancer, cured him, and the guy said, hey, AIDS was developed in a lab in Cold Spring Harbor, which is right off the coast in Long Island. So not too far from where I was. And that's where it came from. It put out. So it's a whole crazy story that I was reading at 12. That one.
Wow.
So I definitely had a weird formation in terms of information. So each level kind of prepared me further to be the weirdo out there that when it came time to find orthodoxy, he's like, yep, this is probably right.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah. John, you had that libertarian phase too?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily concern myself too much with some of these higher questions. At least for many of the years when Dr. Mike and I had first known each other, I was super focused on really just the martial arts, and I read some philosophy here and there, but a lot of my positioning was just sort of okay, floating around in the ether, not doing anything. I didn't take a hard position on any of that stuff until, as we've discussed, Mike, the world starts falling apart a little bit, and you're like, no. I need some answers to these questions. What's going on? And we sort of got into the Jordan Peterson movement a little bit. And, that actually, interestingly, is what made me, apart from Mike's encouragement, to reconsider Christianity as like a valid pathway to solving some of these issues. So I came out of the libertarian, lawbertarian phase when we got to that point. But while I was still within the Jordan Peterson-ish mindset, I was completely content to say, 1776, the Constitution, non-aggression principle, it's all fine as long as you clean your room, right?
Yes.
But that just wasn't satisfactory. So, yeah, at the end of the day, as we know, the validity of the Christian faith, the truth of it, isn't dependent on what we believe is satisfactory. It's simply what is the case. It's a matter of whether or not you're going to accept that as being the case. So what actually, for me, drilled it down, thank God, was actually the transcendental argument for God. And we can get into that later, I know. But for me, at least, way down the rabbit hole, I think that sort of made it click in my head like, no, this actually does make sense. It cannot be otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did you stumble across the tag argument?
So the tag argument, I stumbled across that on Jay Dyer's channel.
Good for
Jay's
him.
Analysis.
Yeah.
A lot of his debating and his apologetics was really instrumental in my conversion. So I'm very grateful to the work that he's done.
Sheath Underwear has come aboard to sponsor the Counterflow podcast. How about that? At sheathunderwear.com/counterflow, or just go to sheathunderwear.com and use Counterflow at checkout for a discount. Men, do yourselves a favor. Elevate your daily comfort with Sheath Underwear. The innovative dual pouch design provides unparalleled support and separation, ensuring each part of you has the space it deserves. Experience the sophistication, finally, of a design that respects your anatomy. The moisture wicking technology sets a new standard in comfort This advanced system not only keeps you cool, which you need when you live in Texas, especially, well, most times of the year, but it prevents chafing, odor, making every movement feel effortless. So, once again, go to sheathunderwear.com/counterflow or use the promo code Counterflow at checkout. Experience the perfect blend of comfort and functionality with Sheath. Yes, as am I. A lot of people, I've heard even priests here and there say, well, I don't know if I like his demeanor or whatever the case may be, but he's brought more people to the church than I have. And so,
100%.
Yeah, he's a great voice out there. Talk about the new book, Orthodoxy and the Medicine of the Future. I love the title. Shout out to Father Seraphim Rose with that title. I believe it's coming out July. I think as this episode drops, it will officially be July. But yeah, to talk about the book.
So yeah, it's a soft July. I think I even put on the page of, hopefully July, wherever I put it there. But as of right now, it's still in the last stage with the editor. I'm still getting the sign off from my priest. He happens to be on Mount Athos right now, so he's having a great time out that way. And
Nice.
God willing, he has safe travels with all the craziness going on. But the Turks don't get too crazy, maybe. I don't know. But the book itself is an outgrowth of that thesis. So the title of my thesis was Prayer and Fasting and the Resolution of Diseases of Modern Civilization. This big, clunky title that I absolutely hate. I wanted to title it Orthodoxy and the Medicine of the Future because Father Seraphim Rose was a very instrumental force in my conversion. I had been writing a book at the time. So to backtrack for a second, my original thesis, what I was accepted with, was going to be on immune dysregulation, over and under stimuli, or over and under reactions to internal and external stimuli. All of that to say what that is your allergies, your autoimmune conditions, your cancer, and your infections. It's either going to be, my immune system didn't respond the way it's supposed to something from the outside or the inside, or it over-responded. So that was in the process of writing another book that was going to title Immune, the Body Politic. And so I was working those two together and was basically looking at the 2016 issue of we have Antifa over here and we have the alt-right and then we have just the libertarians and then we have the straight communists, so like the socialists who are not that as crazy, or no, just the general liberal. The neoliberals were the fourth category. And I had a whole idea that I was working off of that. And then I read Nihilism, The Roots of the Revolution of the Modern Age.
Yeah.
And I'd read that one first. And I had 10,000 words written of a book that I'm probably never going to publish because I read that and said, Father Seraphim Rose wrote this such more succinctly and 1,000 times better than I could ever do. So I never need to do this. And that led down the process of heading towards orthodoxy. And so I'd been accepted to my doctoral program with that idea in mind, that immune dysregulation. And about a third of the way, halfway through, went to my advisor and said, no, I want to look into this Eastern Orthodox asceticism thing. Now, at that time, I'd already been intermittent fasting for about 8 years, pretty, we'll say religiously, because I did it every day, or faithfully. And I decided, no, this is what I want to look into. And so I started reading all of the Hesychastic prayer literature. And there were actually papers on fasting and prayer in Mount Athos. Like Greeks have gone to Athos and studied the monks. And I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot more here. And having read Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, I was like, oh, this yoga stuff is horrible. We need to really tackle this down. Kind of like I said before, we need to show Christians that there is something else out there. And so even that thesis, while it was a health-related one, was something of an apologetic. Going back to the tag argument there, what ended up happening is my director of my program, he even wrote me a letter of recommendation to get into that program, but he turned out to be a militant vegan atheist and did not like the paper topic anymore.
Right.
And nitpicked and just dug and dug and dug all throughout the process towards the end. to the point that my advisor and my review board was just like, what is this? No. And so I actually ended up using TAG. I reached out to Father Deacon Ananias by email and asked him if I could use 2 of his unpublished, they were presented at conferences. So the papers existed, but they weren't online. So I asked for permission to modify them and incorporate them into my thesis. And he gave me that blessing. And so I actually used TAG in my doctoral thesis. What ended up happening there, though, is I've been wanting to, people have been asking me for years, like, hey, this sounds really cool. John amongst them, that, hey, I want to like read that without having to dive through the 200 pages of silliness that my director had, and all the pages of, instead of just having tables like I originally did. Oh no, we have to actually spell out every statistical analysis in sentence form with what the changes were, whether it was significant. And it was just, ugh. So I wanted a public facing book. And then I decided to expand out from there a little bit into the microbiome, which has always been a passion for me, the regenerative agriculture and community and confession, things that I couldn't necessarily tie in on the thesis itself. So I expanded that idea out. And once the podcast started to get some good reception, I decided, hey, maybe now's the time to really finish that out. I had things that were already prepared. I asked for my blessing there and got that. And I submitted to my editors and to my priest back in the end of May is when I submitted that out. So yeah, God willing, maybe by the end of July, but I'm not putting a hard date on that yet.
Right. Okay. Well, I look forward to reading it when it does come out.
I'll definitely be sending you a copy.
Thank you. I've learned since coming to the Orthodox Church, there is a lot of the things that you guys talk about. It's almost like the Orthodox worldview incorporates a holistic view of health and things like that. And I would contrast it with what I know and what I knew of Protestantism, let's say, to where there's a lot more shallow view of health. It's more like, well, I have a problem, I take a pill. I have a problem, I take medicine. I have a problem, I go to the doctor. The doctor is the professional, and he tells me what to do. There's less of a let's explore the root of the issue rather than masking it, let's say, with a pill. And something about the Orthodox worldview, like that's just part of it. It seems like to flow beautifully together like that. And it obviously that's kind of what you guys do on the show. Functional health is Orthodox. I assume you agree with that, and I'd like just explain your perspective on why that is.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, like you just said, functional medicine is about getting to root causes. And it's funny that you say that because by the time this episode drops, probably the day before, our episode on the rootlessness and addressing root causes in medicine and orthodoxy should be dropping. So it's the axe at the root, because as of this week, we're in the post-feast of the nativity of the forerunner, and he has the quote of the axe is laid to the root. And so we decided we were going to piggyback off of his feast and give him a little bit of veneration there. So as you said, the way I like to term it is pharmaceutical whack-a-mole. I'm going to give you this pill, and then that's going to cause this symptom over here. So now if you give you this pill and just boom, 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 you're playing this game of maybe I can manage enough of these symptoms before I roll over. And so by getting to that root cause, that really is the key. You have to look at the person, as you said, holistically. And in the Western model of medicine, we look at things usually as body and soul, psyche, we're looking at the mind. And in doing that, we have a specialist for every little aspect. It's so reductionist. And as you said, I think that it's the outgrowth of Protestantism. It's the other way. It's the hyper-rationalist form comes out of Protestantism, which comes out of the Roman Catholic understanding of absolute divine simplicity, right? The entire Enlightenment project flows through. It's Enlightenment back to Renaissance, back to the Reformation, back all of that, all the way back. And it divorces the supernatural from the mundane, from the natural world. And so if you don't have a immanent God who's also transcendent, if you don't have that immanence, then you are not able to see where he's interacting with you in your everyday life. And so I have to, but obviously that's not satisfactory to humans. We have that God-sized hole in the heart. So we're going to start searching for it somewhere. And whether it ends up landing in yoga, in meditation, from a Buddhist perspective, from psychedelics, the New Age, witchcraft, paganism, just your political movement, your ideology, you're going to try and fill that hole somewhere. And so all of that to say is that Orthodoxy fills that hole. Functional medicine, just from a physical perspective, which does also include your lifestyle perspectives. You want to have a holistic understanding. You want to be able to unify what's going on, mind, body, spirit. And it does so in a way that is logically sound. So,
yeah, John.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll talk a little bit more to the physical end of things, I suppose. So Mike was discussing some of the functional medicine. I think functional training applies in the same way. So the human body is a created thing. So it's meant to function in a very specific way. And because we're fallen, because we break down when we sin, maybe we're lazy, things don't work the way they're supposed to. This sort of functional view of training, returning the body to its intended state, returning it to its optimal function. It's not necessarily only an Orthodox take on it. Obviously there are secular, otherwise coaches out there that'll do the same kind of training. But it fits very nicely within the Orthodox framework, specifically because we do have a means to account for how the body functions in the first place and the fact that it is created. So I always like to remember that when I'm talking or thinking about doing any sort of exercise, that no, this is the way it's supposed to be. So when we perform that exercise, we do it with gratitude. We cross ourselves. We thank the Lord for our body that can function this beautiful way, that's able to then serve others. And it all does just flow very beautifully together. So,
yeah, well put. I think to fill this God-shaped hole that we all have in our heart, there has been my friend Cyprian that was used to do the Royal Path podcast coined the phrase the dim age that we had entered into at some point. It certainly was emphasized over 2020 and 2021. But part of that is, it seems to me, the way I read it, is that we are straying away from some of the Enlightenment principles into people searching, like you said, to fill that hole, whether it be Eastern esoteric stuff or yoga, even in its most simple form. But Instagram is just full of reels and doctors, and I sometimes jokingly call it like pop psychology stuff. When it's the male, what's the male role, what's the female role, and why are people? It's people searching for something. Now, a lot of it doesn't have Christ as like the North Star, so to speak, and so it seems like at best it's narcissism, I suppose, or maybe that's at its worst. But I know there's some good information in a lot of this, and there's always seeds of truth in some of these things. But often I'll see it, and it's like there's this tendency. I don't know. It seems often that it's females that are searching for some of this in a psychology aspect of it. But it's like, I'm in my healing journey, and I'm doing this all for me, and this is about me, and I'm focusing on me. There's a lot of me. Maybe I told someone recently, maybe the male version is like Aaron Rodgers or even Rogan to an extent. It's like, well, if I go to this island and do some hallucinogenics, and boy, then I'm like in touch with spirituality. Whereas it seems like the females are worried about like, what am I eating? Or did I exercise? Or did I do yoga? Or can I find my inner turmoil through this book and figure out what went wrong in my child? There's just all of these things, like the healing journey that so many people are on, because there is a lot of, especially after 2020, people are looking around like, this was all bullshit. A lot of the things that I thought were true were not true. Now I'm on this quest to find it. Oh, look at this reel. This guy said something that I like. I think that's where I'm at. That sort of thing. A lot of what you guys focus on is pulling people. It's almost like Jordan Peterson. He gets people partially there, and then like it stops. And we see the scenario he's involved himself in now. It's just, it's depressing to say the least. But having said all of that, I'm rambling now. Talk about what y'all's project does and pulling people past this sort of pop psychology or these, let's go to this island, do ayahuasca, and have a more Christ-centric focus on your own health.
John, you want to take that first?
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched briefly in one of our episodes, and then we, of course, had a more dedicated episode to yoga, particularly with our guest, Rob Sirico. And on there, we sort of just discussed some of the pitfalls and issues with the system, because a lot of people just don't realize that it has a lot of religious baggage. And I shouldn't even really say baggage. It's not like it's lugging it along. It's inherently religious. And like you said, Buck, there's a lot of seeds of truth that are in some of these worldviews. So it is attractive to people. They appear coherent, and they seem to answer a lot of questions. So like within the yogic worldview, they have a concept of the soul. They call it the Atman. So there's a concept of some ethereal self. They have a concept of, sort of like a debt almost to the world based on your righteous or unrighteous actions. That would be, your karmic debt. Their reincarnation principle, this is where I've had some conversations with people who practice yoga, and I've tried to make it clear to them, does it not seem problematic to you as a human being that your individual self, your character, becomes obliterated at some point? That you go out of it. It's almost atheistic, the same way that a atheist would say, I close my eyes and it's darkness and that's it and it's all gone. In the same way, even though they believe in a reincarnation, it's not necessarily a reincarnation of the self. It's this carrying on of some not particular soul that's specifically their hypostatic, instantiation that we see now into some other thing. So you for all intents and purposes are gone. You're finished. And if you're gone and that soul moves into some other being, they can justify that, the karma, you're trying to reach nirvana by achieving, let me see. Bear with me a moment.
He came with notes. I like it.
I did.
I brought the documents.
That is the word. I want to use some of the correct terminology here. So the ascendance out of that loop of reincarnation, they refer to it as samadhi. So there is an exit from it. But again, once you exit, what self are you? You might have been thousands of selves. So to me, it reduces and it takes away the dignity of the individual that is, of course, present within the Christian worldview, that each human being is created uniquely and separately, and that God knows each of us by name and every hair on our head and every person for all eternity. So, and that's just, for me, one of the particular problems I see with it. It might, be of some small benefit to you now, but does it not bother you not to answer some of these more serious questions? And if it doesn't answer the questions, are you content to just leave them unanswered? I don't know, Mike, if you have anything you'd like to pick up on from there.
Yeah, definitely. Jump off of that.
We've got a new sponsor. It is Perfect Spiral Capital. This is the infinity banking concept. Break free from the system. Perfect Spiral Capital helps you build wealth on your terms outside of the control of the corporate banking cartel and the state-manipulated markets. Invest like a dissident, a true dissident. Take ownership of your financial future with strategies designed for those who refuse to be cogs in the machine. No handouts, no bailouts, just real results. Opt out, build wealth. The state inflates your savings away while Wall Street rigs the game. You guys know this. Perfect Spiral Capital helps you stack real assets and create lasting independence. Go to perfectspiralcapital.com/counterflow and get a special offer for fans of this show. Again, that's perfectspiralcapital.com/counterflow.
So let's just take it as you're saying, without even touching on the fact that you are yoking yourself to demons, without even getting that far down the rabbit hole. Even just from that aspect, like you said, the obliteration of self, it's the opposite understanding of what we're doing with orthodoxy, is that we are uniting ourselves to God. So we are emptying ourselves. We're removing that ego and all of that, but we still maintain our own individuality. And we have to take that was given to us and unite it back to God. So we become the identity with Christ by taking on his attributes, but we're still you. We're still ourselves. And to that point, we were talking a little bit about the self-help on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's the new agey woman aspect or it's the ayahuasca trip, the psychedelic, the psychonaut bro, or even just the Jordan Peterson idea of, clean your room and just pick that little thing, the smallest thing you can pick up. Well, yeah, there is that Christian idea. And that's the saddest part about Jordan Peterson, is that he is so close, but he's still stuck in this Jungian Gnostic Christianity.
Yes.
And if he could just, hang out with Pageau a little more and really lock in on the Dostoevsky and the Solzhenitsyn, he'd be there. And he was in Russia when he had his issues. It's right there. It's so sad. I don't know if you have ever seen the famous quote or the famous video that went pretty viral of when he was gifted the copy of 200 Years Together. If you haven't, looked that up. Yeah, so it's a book that was never translated into English from Solzhenitsyn. And there's a reason why. It has to do with the episode you talked about with Dr. Carlton was basically Russian-Jewish relations over 200 years. And this was 2018 when 12 Rules for Life came out. It was the day it dropped. I was there in the audience. I was about to ask a question, and he kind of got booed off the stage even back then because people weren't really ready to hear that, maybe they're not our greatest ally. And
really?
Yeah. And yeah. And so he was gifted a translation. Somebody actually took the time to spiral bound and translate this book. And he basically asked, hey, as someone who is ethnically Jewish and Russian and all of this, and would you take the time to read this? And he basically said no. And that clip went viral. And all of that to say, there's obviously some blank parts in his understanding, and he's definitely beholden to certain ideas. But a lot of it, I think, comes back to that Jungian understanding, is that no, you have to incorporate the shadow self. And that's what people are doing. They are rejecting God. They're rejecting Christ. They won't actually unite themselves there. That's kind of why I went that whole weird side tangent. But yeah, he really does represent a lot of that modern self-help culture of, I need someone to tell me what to do, when all you have to do is follow Christ, pick up your cross and follow me.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of, in the pop culture self-help stuff, there's less self-sacrifice. I think I know there's less self-sacrifice than there is in the Orthodox Church, but there's a component of it that's it's very showy. Granted, I take pictures of icons, and so there could be someone listening going, well, you show stuff too. But I mean, the girls cooking something in the kitchen and so here's what I went through the other day, that sort of thing. And there's the hashtags becoming better me. There's just always a me. And unfortunately, it almost feels like dark entities are selling stuff that has, again, seeds of truth that also plays on our base instincts of vanity and narcissism and the self-worship, honestly, a lot of it. And those are things we all have temptations to fall for. I can say that firsthand. But I don't know, just from my perspective, a lot of the stuff I see with the self-help plays into that instinct, it seems like. I have to get to some of the topics that you guys talk about. I was so excited. My friend Joanna, who is a catechumen now in the Orthodox Church, has a podcast called The Soil Sisters, a radio show here in Lockhart, and they focus very, very much on regenerative agriculture. And I could not believe it when you guys put out an episode. I texted her and I was like, "Look, see, this is Orthodox." I told her because I didn't know much about it, and she was explaining it to me prior to coming to the church. And I said, "There's something very Orthodox about all of this, and I can't explain it articulately, but I just know it's there." And so you guys can. So talk about that and where this came about and how it ties perfectly into what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I am not the strongest on the regenerative end of it myself. However, I have been tangentially linked to it for at least 15 years at this point. I was early in the ancestral scene, the paleo, primal, keto, intermittent fasting scene. And I was at some of the earliest ancestral health symposium conferences and was working for a company that was speakers there, even when I was still working my master's and stuff. And so to that point, I got to briefly meet, shake hands and say hi kind of thing to Joel Salatin, who's very respected in that field. And so I've been following his work tangentially. And the idea is using inputs to cycle through and make it almost self-sustaining. And like I said, in terms of getting too deep into that, not my wheelhouse, but where I see it linking back up to orthodoxy. And that's why we brought in an expert. We brought in my buddy, Nick Hillman. He is another Orthodox Christian, another jiu-jitsu practitioner. They've all been coming out of the woodwork. Once the podcast launched, apparently everybody is a brown to black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but also Orthodox. I don't know. Pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So to that point, Nick really is an expert on that field. And when I realized, I'm like, oh, hey, I need to bring you in. John and I had already been discussing doing an environmental stewardship episode at some point, because we are called to beautify the earth. That was a large part of what Adam was called to do, and make the rest of the world in God's image through his work. And we have fundamentally failed on that, on every level of it. And my interest in that agriculture was initially in the grass-fed beef and the pasture-raised pork and chicken and eggs and the grass-fed dairy, and then making sure not only just organic, but actually properly grown plants. And all of that, again, growing up and living in New York at the time, it wasn't something that I was able to implement to my own level, but it was a matter of, hey, let me make sure I'm finding at least the sources that I can find. So because it wasn't practical for me, it wasn't my biggest focus. All that to say, it definitely has finally found its day. I remember back in 2010, if you wanted grass-fed beef, Trader Joe's had maybe. We didn't have Whole Foods by us, and you definitely weren't finding anywhere else. The funny thing on that, actually, if you got Australian beef, that was all 100% grass-fed. You were able to find that imported sometimes, and it would be cheaper than conventionally raised garbage. And I was able to secure that. But the point on that is taking the time to care about what happens to that animal and to that plant is going to have downstream health effects for you. So why not pick up your cross on that end as well?
Yeah. John, you got anything on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, as Mike was saying, it's just taking the extra time to care for that living thing. It pays forward to you. God put us here to steward the land, to be the steward over the animals. And when you do that, obviously it pays dividends. I keep bringing up the example we talked about, the oranges in that episode, that one of the regenerative organic oranges that Nick had mentioned, it was like, it took 16 of the, standard non-regenerative oranges to get the same amount of vitamin C. That's absurd. 16 oranges to get, it's nuts. But to do it the right way, to really care for the plants, God really set us up if we were just doing the right thing.
Yeah, well put. And Joanna, I know she's listening, so she's grinning ear to ear because again, the Soul Sisters podcast that she does, they put a massive emphasis on that topic. So now, because of her and you guys and your guests that you had on, I'm finally learning all of this stuff. And another thing she had been talking to me about was water. And lo and behold, you guys did an episode on water. It's, again, just today, I saw her post something and lo and behold, y'all had talked about it. Don't just be, it's summer here in Texas. It's very hot. And I do try to drink a lot of water. I'm a firefighter. And so while I'm at work, I'm certainly trying to hydrate all the time because you never know when you're about to, be sweating your ass off for a few hours. But if there's no minerals in it, if you're not adding minerals to it, oftentimes what you're getting could actually be worse than you think because it's going to dehydrate you. I will say also something y'all have talked about, I think it was in that episode, was PFAS. I don't know what that means, but I was able, through my fire department, they said select number of spots are available. If you want to get tested for the PFAS levels in your blood, which is plastics essentially, I said, well, yeah, I'd like to do that. I keep hearing about this from my friends that are not in the fire department. But lo and behold, one of the recommendations, overall, I was tested pretty well. I tested fine. The results were just a touch high on a few things. But it said better water filtration. I'm like, well, I've got a water filter in my refrigerator. And it's like, no. And it reminded me of how, I've listened to Alex Jones for so long, having been in Austin since 98. He used to always advertise Berkey water filters. And literally, I put it into, don't hate me, some of the Orthodox people. I put it into ChatGPT to analyze the test results, and it literally said Berkey water filter would be an upgrade from whatever I'm doing. And so I want to ask you guys about water. There's like a spirituality to it. Obviously, we talk about that in the church all the time, but I almost had this like Protestant mindset of like, oh yeah, that's the water at church. That's holy water. And then not thinking of it outside of the church, like, well, then this is water. So there's a spiritual component to it largely. There's water throughout the Bible, of course, like you guys mentioned in that episode. And I want to ask about atrazine, speaking of Alex Jones, because I've heard this over the years, but the whole, it turns the frogs gay. I had heard people say that he was not as far off as you think on that. That's become like a joke and a meme and whatnot, and for the Alex haters to make fun of him for. But I've laid it out large here. Talk about water, the spirituality behind it, the mineral aspect of it, structured water, and what the hell atrazine is.
So let's jump on the Alex one first. That's the funnest one. So he actually undersold it. They weren't just turning the freaking frogs gay. They were actually making them functionally transsexual. Not just transgender, not just cross-dressing, not just changing their mate selection choices. They were actually not changing the chromosomes, but the phenotype. They were fully functional female frogs that were being produced when they were exposed to this chemical. That is not something that we're able to mimic on humans, fortunately, at least not publicly. They probably have some weird dungeon out there. I don't know. But having said that, atrazine is a gnarly chemical that beyond its endocrine disrupting aspects on the reproductive end have metabolic effects, and they can lead to metabolic syndrome, which is the cascade of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular issues. All of that combined is metabolic syndrome.
And is that in our water, atrazine?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So fortunately, as you said, there are filters that can get those out. The PFAS are a little bit harder to get out, but it's still possible through either a Berkey or through reverse osmosis with some UV. There's multiple systems that you can get that even if you can't afford a Berkeley, you can still get one of the lower ones. Reverse osmosis is going to be your best bet for most everyday person. You can get a countertop for $200. You can get under the counter for like $300, and it's a pretty easy install. And that will at least get you a lot better of the way. Now, to the point we were talking about the electrolytes, that's a major one, right? And that's one it's kind of funny. You look at the original formula on Gatorade, and it was basically just salt, water, and sugar. And the science on that is pretty solid. Those are the ways that your body stores water, is either through salt or through sugar. Those will help you to retain. Now, both of those will have impacts on your kidney function. And John and I know this from much experience in the combat sports world. I was working on my weight cutting protocol was basically working to do everything you could to go in the opposite direction to strip as much water as possible. Bodybuilders often work in a similar vein.
Yes. Right.
Where you're stripping all your salt, you're going to a complete, almost zero carb idea. I would even go so far as 3 days out from weigh-ins, I would cut any red meat. I would eat a lot of chicken and fish, but no red meat because it has creatine, and creatine stores as well. So that's another thing. So the original Gatorade recipe, that sugar, water, and salt. And if you want to add some creatine, if you want to help to improve your ability to absorb water. In terms of the theological implications, John, you want to jump on that one to go for a little bit?
On the physical aspect or just in general?
Yeah.
Or any aspect. You take it, John.
So, I mean,
you're on a while there, so.
we touched in our episode about, Christ being the living water, and that when he went into the Jordan wasn't purifying him, of course. We know he cleansed the waters. So when we think of water in a spiritual aspect, we can see that the water is what's used to cleanse the whole world. So we baptize people with water. When the Feast of Theophany comes around and we go to the bodies of the water and we bless those. Mike, on our episode, you discussed how then through the water cycle, God willing, then we're able to have the whole world be blessed with this holy water we've blessed. So it's a beautiful image. It's a beautiful reality that God has given us. This water can cleanse us in that way. Just to touch back on the atrazine and the PFAS, just because I got one of these emails the other day, I figured I'd mention it. A lot of people probably in your county or maybe your municipality even might have like a water filtration company or something. We have one where we live, and they send an email every so often and they filter for us. So like PFAS and things like that, they'll tell us what's in the water here. So if you can't, for whatever reason, get a personal filtration system, sometimes it's worth it just to check out who's doing that for you locally and see what their standards are. Thank God where I'm at, they're pretty good. I'm still trying to get a personal filter anyway, but it's just good to know. So for the people listening, check out in your area, what's going on for you and see what they're doing to the water and if it's up to spec for your family.
What's the deal with, and I ask questions that sometimes I know the answer to that should be obvious to people, but it's questions I want put out there on the record. What is the deal with fluoride in the water? Obviously, that's been top of mind because of RFK and the Maha movement. And I think that he's trying to eliminate that. And at certain points, I don't know how much power the feds have to do that in localities. But what is the deal with that?
So fluoride, there's Derek Bro's done a lot of really good work on the recent trials on what's happening with the fluoride, but it's definitively causing mental retardation. It's causing impairments to IQ levels. It's causing neurological issues. Part of the issue is that it fits in the same slot in the periodic table as chloride, which is used for pretty much everything. The logic on putting it into the water system was that they had found some springs in areas of people who had really awesome teeth. And, so if this natural level of fluoride is good for this population here, we're just going to start dumping it everywhere. And depending on how conspiratorial you want to take that idea, they use that justification to help everybody's teeth, or they use it to help dumb down the population. I tend to lean towards the latter, but that's...
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so they do want to just create more Democratic voters.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
There's so much of, people are just so used to it now. If you haven't sort of, asked certain questions yet by now, and people start talking about taking away fluoride or something, I saw in one of our local newspapers, people are super concerned that they don't want to use fluoride anymore. And the dentists even are all up in arms about it, that it's going to cause all this problems with the children's teeth. And I mean, I know it's sort of anecdotal evidence, but just my personal experience, I haven't used a fluoride toothpaste in, I don't know, a decade. I haven't had any cavities. So I doubt that it's going to cause serious issues for the kids. But, you know, it causes concern for people that either haven't had it explained to them, like Dr. Mike just sort of laid out the history and really what it does to the body. And they seem to think it's an innocent thing that at, you know, worst, people just seem to think it's benign. I mean,
we've got some new shirts, Counterflow with Buck Johnson on the front pocket, on the back, a beautiful graphic with, of course, dissident voices and unapproved opinions. You can see this on the YouTube version of the show. Of course, we're putting the graphic up now. $30 flat fee. $30 gets you the t-shirt. The PayPal address is buck@counterflowpodcast.com. That is my PayPal. You can send $30 that method. Send me your address and the size you want. We have sizes small through 2XL. Again, sizes small through 2XL. Go to PayPal, $30 buck@counterflowpodcast.com. Give me your address in there and the t-shirt will be yours. Well, and I think the fact that RFK is part of the Trump administration, now I'm seeing left-wing people in my Facebook feed, let's say, bitch about things that 10 years ago a left-wing person would have been for, right? So, and himself, RFK, is not some sort of right-wing fascist by any means. He's a Democrat. And it's just funny to see, like, now I've seen left-wing people respond, oh, well, now he's gonna make us all, our teeth fall out or something, you know, ridiculous like this. And it's always like, you're not going to talk sense into these people, so I don't try. But it's like, you could still go buy fluoride. Right. Fill every cup of water you want to that you pour out of your faucet with fluoride and just live happily ever after, lower IQ, all of that stuff. You know, it's a lot of scare tactics and propaganda that gets out there. Speaking of scare tactics and propaganda, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring up a topic that would several years ago get me flagged. Let's test the waters here, no pun intended, to see if I'm safe now. But the COVID years, to me, I want to get, you guys are doing a health podcast, and so far it hasn't had to really come up because hopefully for the current time being, for a little while, we're free of that sort of nonsense. But that, I mean, I will say a silver lining to those years, it is what helped me come to the church, along with many, many others, as we know. But it seemed like the way that those years and the narrative that was presented was the inverse of orthodoxy, in my opinion. Talk about what you guys learned, what you saw. Dr. Mike, you are already doing, you know, massive term papers or whatever, PhD papers on orthodoxy and health. So I assume you wouldn't have even fallen for this anyway. But what did you guys see through those years, and what were you thinking as things happened all the time? These new scare tactics and crazy narratives, and banning those of us that didn't want to take a shot, and removing my stuff off of YouTube, by the way.
I also had some stuff pulled. So I did drop 4 or 5 videos ranging from March to August of 2020 on that exact idea. And my initial, what I was doing, like statistical analyses on population densities in the major cities. Because in the beginning, if you remember, it was mostly this major city here and that major city there, and New York and the New York Metro in general, New York, New Jersey were some of the biggest hit areas. Now, fortunately for myself, I'd already escaped from New York. I was already out here in Arkansas. But I was looking at what was happening there, and I'm just, this doesn't make sense. The math doesn't math. And it was one of those where the topic definitely was not allowed to be discussed, and everything about it was fundamentally wrong, particularly from a functional perspective, but even from a conventional model of oh, we're going to isolate you over here. But if it was any other cold, yeah, but okay, so go home, take your antibiotics, which not really a fan, although it's a virus. So maybe I have to give you an antiviral, whatever. It isn't treated the same way. No one dealt with a flu the same way. So even if it was, skin eating Ebola, it was never going to be a method that was the best choice. Then came the mask idea, and now you're going to recirculate in a moist environment because no one was using N95s. And even if they weren't properly fitted. And the second that seal is broken, they were no longer a viable option. And so it was just a whole wild time of trying to shout from the rooftops, like, hey, this is nonsense, both from a health and a political end. Like, none of this makes sense. Like, no. And it's
spiritual, for sure.
Well, to that point, funny, that's actually how I first encountered Father Zachariah Lynch over at Blog. And he was shouting from the rooftops back then. I'm like, hey, this guy's awesome. Forgive me, Father. This guy's awesome. But you know what I mean? Like, hey, this page is great. Like, this Father Zachariah guy, he's awesome. And so we hope to have him on the show at some point in the not too distant future.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so in terms of the political aspects, the ramifications of that, a lot of it really was, I saw like, no, they are just going to run forward towards this vaccine that is going to be completely ill-equipped to deal with this. And they're going to tell us that, oh no, don't worry, just trust the science. There's going to be no side effects because it's totally cool. The craziest part is that they basically 3D printed the initial vaccines days after the first cases in Washington. They used a Chinese transcript of what the genome was supposed to be at that time, and we're already doing first phase trials in January of 2020 before anything was even known here. And I remember telling people, like, they were traveling, and this was like February. My brother in particular was down in Aruba. I'm like, get home now. Things are about to get really weird. And people kind of just went along with their day, and it was what it was. And it was definitely a weird time. Having said all that, I'm definitely, I wouldn't say thankful for it, but at the very least, like much of modern things that have happened, it's opened people's eyes that, hey, there's a problem with our healthcare system. Maybe we should do something about this. And it allowed RFK to have more of a voice in the health movement. And it's funny, like you said, that was the crunchy granola liberal 10 years ago. And that's who was going. He was talking about environmental toxins. He was talking about the vaccine issue. He was talking about the COVID stuff in the beginning. And he was way ahead of the curve on a lot of the stuff. And now he's just, like you said, a fascist. And
yes, right. Yeah. And he hasn't changed a bit. He's still the same guy.
True.
Yeah. It's wild how the population trends around someone or some idea can just swap. John, I'll let you speak on that.
Yeah. For me, as you mentioned, there's sort of a spiritual dimension to that as well. And the whole way that it was gone about, the top-down aggressive enforcement, the closure of businesses, the coercion really towards getting the stabby, it's antithetical to the Christian worldview because Christ doesn't force anybody.
Yes.
Christ is gentle, he's loving, he encourages, he courts, and he wants you to choose him, and he's obviously the best choice, so you should. But if all that stuff was, in fact, a good choice and we should have done it, we could have been courted. You could have provided the information. It could have been open and transparent, but it was aggressive and it was shoved down your throat and it was do it or else. And it really felt it to me, and I know to a lot of people, it was offer the incense or die kind of thing.
Yes.
Wasn't going to offer the incense. So a lot of people kind of went into their little kind of catacombs during those years. And, it was a really scary time. You didn't know how far down in the rabbit hole of that enforcement it was actually going to go. The catacomb church became almost an imminent reality in like people's minds. And it's like, thank God it didn't go so far, at least in our area. I know in some places it did go quite far.
Yes.
I remember seeing videos from up in Canada. They were doing, God help them, horrendous things, like fencing off churches. And, if you went in there, they would rip the fences down to go in and drag you out. There was a video I saw floating around back then too of like people doing SOS Morse code with flashlights across the Niagara Falls, I think. They were like,
Jeez.
help. It was just a crazy time. Thank God we're out of that.
Yeah, for now. But when the societal, I don't know, regulations, if you will, for lack of a better term, squeeze down on people, there's people that squeeze out the sides, basically. But there was good things that happened then. Again, we've kind of discussed the surge in Orthodoxy certainly happened, and so many Orthodox parishes did not close as a relative to other denominations. We're not a denomination, but you guys know what I mean. But man, I saw so many people. I mean, it just clamped down a little bit on us relative to, let's say, the Soviet Union or Romania and these places in the past. But so many people just like, I'm scared. What do I do? Please help. And it's just like, they barely did anything. Like, and that scared you? I know, not many, but I knew Orthodox people that took the stab. And it's like, well, I just wanted to keep my job, or I was scared, or this person was old that I knew. And it's like, what happens? Like, that's so far from being a martyr, like the people that we look up to in the church who had the worst things come at them and they still stood their ground and said, no, I will not deny Christ. And it's like, hey, the media scared you with this bug that was going around. Okay, I'll fall in lockstep. Crazy. But again, there's that, even some people that did that, I think now are looking back going, damn it, that was a mistake. And I screwed up. There's priests I know that, I can't think of if this guy was on Mount Athos, but there was priests hearing confessions for people that took the vaccine, which is beautiful. A lot of priests, including my own, were writing people the letters or whatever you need to get out of it, the religious exemption letters. Before we get out of here, geez, you guys, this has been so easy. But I also want to ask you about gut health and the way that manifests itself in negative ways or positive ways throughout our entire being. And also, I keep hearing from people that know more than me about sunscreen. Talk about gut health and then sunscreen. Maybe that's sort of related. We'll see.
So yeah, there can definitely be a way in which the sunscreen can be tied in. So first off with that, the bacteria, virus, fungi, or archaea of the body, the microbes that are in and on our body make up, depending on who you ask, anywhere from 10 to 100 times as many cells as what we have. And to that point, they are part of the ecosystem that exists in us. And the way we tackled it in our episode was that, it's a fractal layers. We are to be a microcosm of the macrocosm of the cosmos, of the universe. We're supposed to embody God here in the universe. That, on a physical level, that microbiome is basically a large part of what we are. So it's making up us. And we use the analogy of the body of Christ, such that body, we are each individually members of the body. And so we want to have everything performing optimally. It goes the same way with that regenerative agriculture, right? There's different little things that we can chip away at to improve the totality of our health. And those gut bacteria have a role in pretty much everything. Your bacteria produce more serotonin than your brain does. They help to break down estrogen. So for men who are now low T is the big rage these days, it's on TRT. And a lot of it is aromatization by bacteria in the gut that are allowing the testosterone to get converted to estrogen. Now your estrogen levels are up and your testosterone as well. There's obviously just the pure digestive aspects. There's a lot of pathogenic bacteria that have in their cell walls what's called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. It is an endotoxin, an inside toxin. And when that bacteria dies, it releases those toxins into your bloodstream. If someone goes through sepsis, that it's gotten all the way into the bloodstream. But in a lot of people, it may not get that far where it's going to be an acute cause of death, but it's causing chronic low-grade inflammation. So whether we're talking about arthritis or Crohn's or celiac, which that we talked about a little bit about how glyphosate, what they're spraying, the herbicides they're spraying onto the crops is causing little holes to be punched in the gut, which then allows larger proteins and things that don't belong in the bloodstream to get there. That's then in turn causing autoimmunity. There is just a cascade of things that your gut health is going to help deal with. And so there's a wall, just like your skin is a wall to keep pathogens out. The way I've always used it is that ancestrally, unless you were slashed by like a rusty knife, there is no point at which, and I use that same analogy for vaccines, there's no point in which a bacteria, a pathogen of any type is going to get directly into your bloodstream, short of, again, getting sliced by something. Generally, it's going to go through your nose, your mouth, go through your skin, but it's going to encounter what's called MALT, which is the mucosal associated lymphoid tissue. That is your first line defense. That's when you first start to drop off your white blood cells, you start to drop off your immune response there. That in turn allows you to understand what's happening. By the time it gets to your gut bacteria, they in turn are understanding what's happening, and there's a crosstalk between your immune system and the bacteria. If you have the wrong ones showing up to the party in your bacteria in your gut, it's going to dysregulate your immune response. So now we covered the immune system, your hormones, your brain. You hits every level there. And fun little side wrap around again. I had mentioned how I was at that Jordan Peterson and when there was the after talk, when it was the book signing section, I got a chance to ask him, and I kick myself now. I wish I was Orthodox at the time, like actually received and really dialed it in. Because the question I asked him was like a Jungian idea of, hey, you talk a lot about the collective unconscious and the bacteria in our gut. There's quorum signaling, and there's a lot of information that's passed back and forth between the bacteria. Do you think that has anything to do with the collective unconscious? And, I haven't really thought about that, but you might be onto something there. That's about it. But I need to work with my Jordan Peterson. But
That's good. That's good.
So the long and the short of that is, I do think there's something there. I do think that because those bacteria are a large portion of us, not that they are the physical instantiation of the Logi, but kind of like how our brain is where we localize our mind, our consciousness, and our heart is where we localize the nous, our ability to tap into the spiritual, the noetic realm. I do think there's something to those gut bacteria. I think there's something of a noetic component to them. That is, let's be very clear, that is not kind of dogmatic statement. That is not kind of any definitive statement. That's just kind of where my brain thinks. There is something there that we have that connection because those bacteria are going all around. And so I think that in making the right choices to improve our gut health, I do think there is overall improvement to our mind, which in turn will have downstream effects. I think because we are holistic beings, we are tripartite, all three, any benefit to any one is going to theoretically have a benefit to the rest of them. So,
right. It's not dogmatic, but you feel it in your gut. John,
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Yes. John, go ahead, speak on any of that.
I'm going to be completely honest. On the gut health end, whatever I know about that subject, I'm blessed to have learned from Dr. Mike. So
he's got it.
I don't know that I can add much further to that one.
To have a callback, as they say in the business, to something you mentioned earlier, and I had to ask it because I don't do yoga, but I know there's probably some people, probably females listening that do. What if they say, okay, I get it, that it's demonic and it's spiritual, which anything spiritual outside of Christ is some form of demonic spirituality. I just take it to sweat and stretch. I don't care about the religious aspect. John?
I'd recommend you go to a traditional functional strength training class instead. It's a lot of the same movement patterns extracted from the religious context. You may be there to sweat and stretch, but the context is important. The orientation matters. So if all you're looking for is a sweat and a stretch, you can easily get that within a different context that's not tethered or, as we said, yoked to any of these other sort of esoteric traditions in the East. So, it is important. And of course, your internal disposition matters. So we're not telling people that, if as we said in our episode, if you don't go to the strip mall and you take a few yoga classes, you're not damned or something. Right. we wouldn't claim that to be the case, but it is just a word of caution to people to know what exactly you're getting involved with. Because of course, when you open, just a little crack in the door, the devil can just kick that one right down and come in if you give him the chance. So it's prudent not to allow him the chance to do that.
Yeah, I suppose as you were answering that, I started thinking of, you could see like an Orthodox girl or something saying, well, I was just at a bachelorette party and we went to the tarot card reader just for fun. I don't believe it. But it's like, well, I mean, you're setting yourself up for spiritual failure at some point, maybe even if it seems minor, Yep. I guess guys could say the same thing. I just went to the strip club. I don't like them. I don't, it's like, well, you're there. Yeah. All right. We've been going over an hour. You guys are very easy to talk to. This is great. I should say at the end, plug away the show, the book, your online presence, anything really that you'd like. Yeah, so it's mostly going to be for me beyond the show. John is a voice in the wind, but by design. But the Orthodox Health Podcast, we got us on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Substack. We're trying to build that a little bit. We have a Telegram page, but nothing too much crazy on there. You can grab me at Dr. Michael Christian and Orthodox Health on Instagram. The website, if you want to get the book or to work with me, is orthodoxhealth.com. For the book specifically to pre-order, it's orthodoxhealth.com/book. But other than that, we hope you check us out. We appreciate Buck having us on. This was awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. John, appreciate you. Dr. Mike, appreciate you too, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a blessing and an honor to be here with you today. Thank you very much.
You got it. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion, maybe learned a few health tips, and definitely I hope you learn to go subscribe to their podcast. Next week is very fascinating. I don't even want to drop too many more hints other than that. It's a person who's never been on before, and boy, what a background. It's demonic, to say the least. As for this show, subscribe to the YouTube page. Go to the Telegram group if you'd like. Join us there. Follow me on X at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Like the sound of the Counterflow Podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been a Dissident Media production.